This conference will now be recorded.
Anna, you're muted.
Thank you. Can everyone see my screen? All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day. I think by now almost everyone has signed in, but if you've come in a little late and you missed it, we have multiple ways that you can sign into the meeting. You can sign in using the SurveyMonkey link, which will be reposted in the chat function. You can also email myself or Tom, and we'll get you signed in. My email is avanderzwag@burtonplanning.com. That's AVANDERZWAAG@burtonplanning.com. And Tom's email is tbreckle@clintonsheriff.com. We're looking for your name, your email address, your phone number, your job title, your employer, and that you attended the 2:30 core meeting. You can also provide that information in the chat box. That works just as well. And if you're calling in by phone, it might be easier for you to send an email, or you can also text myself, text me at 614-406-7775. And we're looking for your name, your email, your phone number, your title, your job title, and your employer. If you are a township trustee, you can also include that. And I see we have a lot of emails and phone texts coming through, so thank you so much for doing that. That helps us out a lot. And I'll make that reminder again periodically. I'll probably sound like a broken record by the end of the meeting, but we just thank you so much for taking the time to be here. So we'll go ahead and get started. So Tom, I don't know if you have any introductions that you want to say first. You're welcome to say anything, or I can keep going.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. First and foremost, I would like to welcome everyone that is participating in this opportunity to be able to get your communities recognized. And as a part of this effort, everything done here will help prepare your communities on down the line to help better mitigate themselves from natural disasters. And it starts with getting input from you guys. I can always put down what I think sounds great. These folks here from Burton Planning Services can always throw down stuff, but really what it comes down to is that you folks in your communities are the eyes and ears. You know what has happened, what areas need to be fixed. Input from you is going to be very critical for this. So I appreciate you being a part of this today. And for those folks that have called in by phone, there are hard copies of the surveys that went out to all the trustees and the chief elected officials for each municipality. So those are in those packets, those hard forms that you can fill out, or if you're one of the ones that I've been spamming emails with, there's opportunities to be able to fill out those PDF fillable forms. And the most important thing is be heard, get the information in, because more people that come in and comment and provide information, the better and stronger this is. So I'm going to stop babbling now. Now I'm going to turn it back over to the professionals to help lead us through this effort and try to pull as much good information from you as possible to help enable this planning going forward. Ann, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'll reiterate everything that Tom said throughout the course of this presentation. But first and foremost, again, thank you for taking the time to be here. Throughout the process, we'll have multiple ways that you can participate, whether you prefer to fill out physical copies of surveys or fill them out online. Throughout the whole process, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. You can type any questions in the chat function. You can unmute yourself and just ask a question. Throughout this process, we just want to encourage as much dialogue as possible, so that way we can get you the best plan that meets your community's needs. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Anna Vanderzwag. I am an associate planner with Burton Planning Services, and I've been working with Tom as well as the rest of this team from Burton Planning to coordinate the update to the Clinton County Hazard Mitigation Plan. So also on the call today, we have Kimberly Burton. She's the project manager and she's the president of Burton Planning Services. We also have Brett Morris, who is an associate planner, and he does a lot of the plan preparation as well as the HAZIS and data collection throughout the process. And we also have Rushi Agarwal on the phone, and she will be monitoring the chat as well. She is an associate planner, and she's been helping us with these public involvement meetings and making sure that we get as much feedback as possible from all of you. So your role in this process, you will be the core planning committee members. And I see we have 34 people on the call. This is amazing. This is great participation. So I'll go ahead and dive into some more details about the planning process. So again, this is reiterating everything that I've said already. You can sign in to this meeting if you haven't already using SurveyMonkey link. You can email myself or Tom, and you can also text me at 614-406-7775. And we're looking for your name, email, phone number, your job title, employer, and that you attended the 2:30 core meeting. Again, if you have any questions throughout this entire presentation or as we're filling out surveys, do not hesitate to ask. Brett and Rushi will be monitoring the chat, so you can ask the questions directly in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question that way. If you are calling in, you can unmute yourself by typing in *6, and that will unmute you. We will keep you all muted throughout just to avoid any echoing or, that kind of thing. Keep things as easy to hear as possible. So again, today we will be going through a brief presentation about hazard mitigation planning, and then we'll wrap up with 3 surveys. And we will have multiple versions of these surveys, and they're all available on our website. So I'm going to show you how you can access those. Our website is burtonplanning.com/Clinton-HMP. And we'll go ahead and have that posted in the chat so you guys can access that as well. So let me show you how to navigate the website here. So this is the website, and you'll see below we have 3 tabs. The first tab has all the information, the background information about the plan, and it also has the previous plan from 2016. The Participate in the Planning Process tab has the meeting dates and times. But today what I'd like you to focus on is the Meeting 1 materials. So here you can see all of the materials that we'll use today are uploaded here. This includes the agenda, some background information as a handout. Also, there's a PDF version of the presentation that I am giving. So if you'd like to go back and reference that after the meeting, you can pull that up really easily. And I'd also like to draw your attention to this hazards overview document. We will use this later on in the call as we're completing one of the surveys. So all of these bits will be helpful for you to have handy. I know that Tom sent out all of the materials through email as well, and he also mailed out paper copies. But if you are having trouble accessing any of the surveys or any of these materials and you need us to send them to you directly, please do not hesitate to ask. Just let us know in the chat if you're having any issues accessing this information, and we'll get you squared away. All right, so back to the presentation. A little bit more of why we are here today. Today we're here to update the 2016 Clinton County Hazard Mitigation Plan. So I'll give you an overview of the hazard mitigation planning process. I'll give you an update on where we are in the planning process, and we'll spend the bulk of the time gathering input from you all, the stakeholders and core community members that will help us pull together this plan in a way that shapes it to your community's needs. And we'll also go over some next steps in the process. So we'll go ahead and get started on the overview. Is anyone having any issues accessing the website that they'd like to draw our attention to at the moment? Okay, great. Then we'll go ahead and move on. So some of you may be wondering what exactly is hazard mitigation. So hazard mitigation is a sustained action to reduce or eliminate the long-term risk to human life and property from hazards. And there are 3 goals associated with this planning process. The first is that we're aiming to reduce the potential losses from any future disasters that might occur. We're also aiming to identify natural hazards as well as man-made and geological hazards, and identify any actions or projects that we can complete to reduce losses associated with those hazards. And finally, we are looking to establish a process to implement these actions. So all of the feedback that we collect from you will be putting into an implementation plan that we can give the county and each of the communities within Clinton County. So that way you can say, in the next 5 years, these are some projects that we need to accomplish in order to reduce losses associated with the hazards included in the plan. So there are lots of different types of hazards that we can include. Hazards include, you have the water-based hazards such as flooding or dam and levee failure. You have the wind-based hazards such as the winds associated with hurricanes or tornadoes and other damaging winds. You have the severe summer storms and severe winter storms. The heat and drought-based hazards. Also wildfires are associated with that category. And you have the geology-based hazards such as landslides and earthquakes. Invasive species is often included as a hazard in these plans. And then you have the man-made hazards such as hazardous materials, transportation of hazardous materials, and terrorism. So in thinking about the process of hazard mitigation and responding to disasters, hazard mitigation planning occurs well before a disaster takes place. And so we are looking to prevent the worst case scenario. We're trying to plan well ahead. So this even comes before the preparedness step. Preparedness, that is when an emergency operation plan comes into play. It's when a disaster is imminent and you're looking to take those steps knowing that the disaster is coming. The third step in the disaster response cycle is the actual response, which occurs during a disaster. And this is when short-term emergency aid and assistance comes into play. And finally, after a disaster takes place, that's when the recovery occurs, and that's when your disaster recovery plan takes place. So again, we're looking here well before a disaster occurs. We are just trying to identify any projects that we can implement in Clinton County that will help reduce losses associated with the hazards that are included in this plan. And there are some legal foundations for why this planning process even takes place. So the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act in 1988 said that presidential disaster declarations trigger federal assistance through FEMA. And then in 2000, the Disaster Mitigation Act formed the legal basis for FEMA requiring state, local, and tribal mitigation plans. So this act, the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000, said that jurisdictions must have an adopted plan to receive funds from FEMA in the event of a disaster. So this, again, is why your participation today is incredibly important, because your participating allows your jurisdictions the opportunity to adopt this plan going forward. And then it allows your community to receive funds from FEMA should a disaster occur in your community. So again, there are some requirements that FEMA has that we must include in this planning process. So to receive FEMA funding, hazard mitigation plans must be adopted by local jurisdictions and updated every 5 years. So you might say in 2016, we just had a plan created. Well, it's 5 years almost down the road, and so it's time to update that plan, and it must be approved by FEMA and then adopted by the county and all local jurisdictions. And that's if your communities want to receive funding from FEMA. Hazard mitigation plans must include public participation and a documentation of that process. We also need to include an existing conditions and demographics section in the plan, and include any major disaster declarations since the previous plan. Risk assessments and vulnerabilities for all of the hazards will also be included in the plan, and will include mitigation actions, which we is what we call projects that are included in this plan. We'll include those as well. And then we include a section on how the plan will be maintained and updated over the next 5 years. So there are many federal funding sources that can be used to help fund some of these projects that we will include in the plan. I won't go through these in too much detail at the moment, but if you have specific questions about funding and how it applies to specific projects that you might want to include in the plan, let us know. We'd be happy to discuss that with you. There's individual assistance and public assistance funding, fire mitigation assistance grants, hazard mitigation grant program, pre-disaster mitigation, and flood mitigation assistance. So you might also be wondering what types of projects can be funded. Projects include property acquisition, demolition, relocation. You can also receive funding for property reconstruction, structure elevation, flood proofing, retrofitting. You can also receive funding for things like generators and safe rooms. And you can also receive funding for projects like soil stabilization. There are lots of different projects that can be included in this plan. So our goal here today is that we go through some of the projects that were included in the previous plan and identify their status, but then also consider what type of projects you might want to see that weren't included in the previous plan. So if you have hopes of getting something funded through federal funding, if you have hopes of receiving funding for some of these projects, we just need to include them in the plan. If they're not included in the plan, getting funding will be a lot more challenging. So including these types of projects in the plan will make it simpler for you to receive federal funding. There are lots of benefits of hazard mitigation planning. I'm also seeing a note here coming through in the chat that that some of you might be wondering how you can get hard copies of the materials. Hard copies were mailed. Tom mailed those out a week and a half ago, I believe. So if you have called in and you are looking to get your hands on a hard copy, let us know. Tom did mail those out last week, but if you didn't get it, we'll make sure to get you a hard copy after the meeting. So just let us know in the chat.
Quick clarification, Anna, the hard copies were mailed out to the elected officials, primarily the county trustees and the mayors being the chief elected officials. All other folks who had received those by email had them as attachments. And if unfortunately it ended up in a spam folder, a lot of that same information is available on the website mentioned earlier.
Great, yeah. If anyone needs specific assistance getting access to the surveys, whether it's through online or if you need us to email those again to you directly, just let us know in the chat. We're happy to do that. All right, so as I said, there are many benefits to hazard mitigation planning. The first is that this planning effort helps minimize property damage as well as economic losses, injuries, and loss of human life associated with hazardous events. It also enhances the public's awareness and education of natural and man-made hazards. And it also, as you all being here today, helps coordinate interjurisdictional preparedness measures, as well as projects and programs for efficient and effective implementation. This planning process also provides tools for decision makers to better prepare for disasters and allows you to achieve state and federal regulatory compliance to be eligible for funding. So municipalities can receive funds for building and infrastructure needs, such as addressing issues caused by hazards or improvements to future issues that might be occur as a result of a hazard. Police and fire departments can receive funds for safety-related equipment and resources. And schools can also receive funds for safety-related equipment and resources. Businesses have the potential to reduce and eliminate site and operational impacts that might occur from hazards. And the general public, they can reduce and eliminate monetary and emotional costs associated with hazards from things like lost lives, potential fatalities, as well as lost homes. So that is an overview of hazard mitigation planning and its purpose and what you can get out of it. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask about that? Feel free to either post it in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask. If you've called in, you can unmute yourself using *6. And I will also comment that a lot of that information that we just went over is available on the informational handout that we included in the email, and it's also on the website. So if you see the informational handout, a lot of that is reiterated in that if you want to go back, and again, the copy of the presentation is also on the website, so you can go back and refer to that if you have questions. And as we move on, again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to post them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask, no problem. All right, so we'll go ahead and discuss the process specific to Clinton County and our schedule going forward. So this is a list of tasks that we have completed so far. So we've gathered some information on the critical facilities, as well as some mapping, some base mapping using GIS. We've also collected repetitive loss information in Clinton County and summarized features and demographics of the county and its communities. We've also collected historical information from of previous hazard events. So today, what we are focusing on is identifying which hazards you'd like to include in the next plan, and which projects from the previous plan have been completed, or if progress has been made on those plans. So we're looking to identify the status of each project included in the previous plan.
Anna, we have two questions that have popped into the chat. The first one is from Mayor Mongold, going back to some of the different funding opportunities that's out there. First one is, would drug-related issues such as trafficking, blighted homes, homelessness, and so forth fall under mandated disasters or potential disasters?
That is a good question. So this plan can take many shapes. We have not included drug-related issues in plans thus far, but ultimately it comes down to what you find are hazards in your community. We would consider it a man-made hazard, and we could include it in the plan. And so when there will be a survey coming up in the next 10 minutes or so that we'll get to. That would be a really good opportunity for you to include what specifically related to drug-related issues such as trafficking or blighted homes and homelessness. If you feel like that is a significant problem that you would like addressed in this plan, we can include a section on that, and that will be on survey 2 that will ask you about that going forward. So that's a great question.
And if I could bend that question just a little bit.
Absolutely.
If we put something about this into the plan, and when it gets reviewed by the state of Ohio, or if it's one of the ones selected from FEMA for review, either way, it would have to be addressed at those levels, which in effect would have some sort of input or impact policy, possibly sometime on down the line. So this could be a good opportunity to get something out there started that, quite frankly, is being experienced in a lot of communities across the country.
Yes. And some of my colleagues are making the point that only natural hazards are mandated by FEMA to be included in the plan, but we can include anything else if it's a priority to your community. And so, yeah, we are happy to consider that. And another alternative, and you'll see more on this in the survey that we have going forward, but if that is a perspective that you would like us to, as opposed to focusing on it as one specific hazard, it could be something that we incorporate into each of the hazards. How might drug-related issues be impacted by other hazardous events? Specifically, homelessness, how would that be impacted if you have a tornado event come through the county or something like that? So just keep that in mind. We'll open up discussion to that once we get to that survey. Does that sound good? Any other questions along those lines? All right, and we'll go ahead and keep going. So this milestone, or this project, is made up of 8 milestones. The first being the project kickoff announcement that we sent to you a few weeks back. So we sent that out through email. All of that kickoff, all of those materials are also on the website under that first tab I showed you. The second milestone is this meeting. This is the first set of planning meetings. After today, we will go ahead and perform risk assessments on each of the hazards that you want included in this plan. And we'll also review the projects and mitigation actions, their status, and we'll also develop new ones based on your feedback today. We will have a second planning meeting in the beginning of August, the first week of August. And after that meeting, we will prepare a draft plan that we will ask all of you to take just a moment to review and provide any comments that you may have. Finally, we'll send the plan out to FEMA for review. Once it's approved by FEMA, your communities can adopt the plan. The county and each jurisdiction will need to adopt the plan. Townships, while it's great if they do adopt the plan, they are included in the county under FEMA's eye and FEMA's perspective. Once the county adopts the plan, the townships don't necessarily need to adopt it specifically, but they are more than welcome to if they would like to show support for it. And then finally, milestone 8 is just closing out the project. So this graphic shows a visual of those milestones that I mentioned on the previous slide. So you can see here, we're still pretty early in the planning process. We are nearing the end of June. Our next meeting will be August 5th. And so that will be a month and a half away. And until then, we'll be working on drafting the risk assessments of each of the hazards that you identified today. Our ultimate goal is to have the plan adopted by February of 2021 to avoid Our goal is to have it adopted and approved before your previous plan expires. And so helping us, we'll help guide you through this process. That way we stay on track to make sure there's no lapse in coverage. So you're always covered and you can always get funding from FEMA. So our next meeting will be, as I said, August 5th, and it will be the same time and also through GoToMeeting. So August 5th at 2:30, if everyone would put that on your calendars, that would be great. And we'll send out lots of reminders again as well. Okay, so going into a little bit more of an overview of what we're asking from each of you. First and foremost, we are asking you to provide local knowledge and data as needed, including things about the history of hazardous events in your communities, demographic information. You as members of the community have a much better sense of how your community is impacted by flooding or tornadoes, for example, or severe storms. You have a much better sense of how your community is impacted than I do as a consultant. So we are asking you for your specific information. What has happened to you? What's happened to your communities? Your sense of that is so significant to this process. So we are also asking you to help identify which hazards should be included in this plan and help us prioritize those hazards. We are also looking to develop a new list of mitigation projects or actions that we can include, as well as determining the status of actions and projects that were included in the previous plan. And we'll also ask you to help us prioritize those actions. You'll also provide feedback on the draft plan once it's been completed. And we're also asking you to participate in both sets of planning meetings, again, August 5th at 2:30. And then once the plan has been approved by FEMA, we're asking your assistance in adopting the plan by your local jurisdiction. So today we have 3 things that we are going to do moving forward. The first, as I've said already, we're going to add that second meeting to our schedules, August 5th at 2:30. We are going to also go through 3 surveys and have conversations on each survey and collect any feedback that you might have on that. All right, so we'll go ahead and jump into the first survey. This is the goals survey. Well, I guess I should stop for a moment and see if there are any other questions. Right now, we're pausing the presentation. We've asked we've shown you all the content. So if there's any questions on the content we presented so far, please let us know. Right now that we're about to break into the survey portion, so we'll be a little bit more interactive and open it up to more communication and dialogue.
So this is a good time that if you're doing a little bit of multitasking to kind of focus a little bit. So if your name is Brian, you may want to get yourself a fresh Diet Coke. And for the other folks, you're probably going to see some links that's going to pop up. When you click on the links, you can still do the multiple web pages and fill out the surveys in the background, and you should still be able to hear the presentation that's going on. That's all I had. Yes,
good point. Are there any questions about this? Brett posted a link to the online version of this survey in SurveyMonkey in the chat, so you can follow that link if you'd like. You can also download either a printable version of the survey or a fillable version. So we have 3 total versions of each survey. The printable version, you can just print and fill out by hand and either mail or scan that in and send it to the county EMA. The second option is the fillable form, which you can just download and fill out on your computer using Adobe Acrobat. And you can just save that and then email that to us. Or finally, you can do the online version of the survey through SurveyMonkey, and that link has been posted. If we could also get an updated link to the website posted in the chat, Brett, that would be super helpful. I think you just posted it, but we'll just do it again just to be sure that everyone has access to the website. All right, so I'm actually going to close out of the presentation and open up the surveys and go along through those with you. So we'll first do the goals survey. All right, so the first important thing that we are going to ask you to do is make sure that your name and organization are on the top of each survey. So if you're on the call, go ahead and put your name and organization. And I will make a note ahead of time that on SurveyMonkey, the goals survey and the first two surveys are on the same link. So if you're going ahead at your own pace, which is completely okay, just so you know, you'll get to that second survey probably just a little bit quicker, but feel free to read the instructions and go at it. It's pretty self-explanatory in SurveyMonkey. All right, so the goals survey, it is important to revisit the goals and objectives from the previous plan from 2016. And these goals will help guide the current update to the plan. So we're asking for your input on if these goals are still relevant. And if you think the goal is relevant as it's written, you can just click the checkbox and check it off. If you think that something needs modified in the way it's written, you can go ahead and add some comments on the line provided. But we'll read through these one by one. And if you have any comments that you'd like to put open into the discussion, have us discuss it, that would be great. We can go ahead and discuss each of these. So the first goal from the 2016 plan was to increase public information and awareness about hazards that affect Clinton County. So this one is based on public information and making sure that the public is prepared and aware. Do you think that's still applicable as it's written? Feel free to unmute yourself. If you agree, you can just say yes in the chat. But if you would like any amendments, let us know. All right, well, yes, good point, Brett, that we'll go through all of these together, but you can fill them out at your own pace. You can fill them out with your own comments. You don't need to vocalize your comments. Any discussion only helps, but feel free to make any notes on your own surveys and then send them in. We have one comment. I think that is Tom saying, I propose yes, but modify to leverage social media and virtual options to account for low manning in the current COVID-19 situation. That is a great, yeah, that's great. Great comment.
My apologies. I had enter before you said, well, why not fill out your own survey? So my apologies on that.
Oh, no, that's fine. We prefer that everyone fill out their own individual, even if you're just agreeing with what I have on the screen. That way we can back up our points and show FEMA the agreement. We have a question about goal 2. So goal 2 is decrease dam hazard level. So The next, let's see, it's goal 2 through goal 9. And those goals each are associated with a hazard that were included in the previous plan. So some counties prefer to have goals that are specific to the hazard, such as decrease dam hazard level. So you're aiming to reduce the impact from dam or levee failure. But also some communities prefer to have more generalized goals that overarch the whole plan rather than specific hazards. And you'll see that on one of our upcoming surveys, the projects are all organized by hazard. So keeping it organized in this way might be best for your community, but if there are other goals that you have that are unrelated to one specific hazard, we can include that as well. It's just completely up to you. So again, goal 2 is decrease dam hazard level. We've had a question about the vagueness of it, maybe. Do other people echo that maybe it needs to be a little bit more specific, or what are your thoughts on that goal?
I'm going to go ahead and say this audibly versus just typing this in. Adam Feike is our FEMA floodplain coordinator, and he's probably one of the most knowledgeable persons that we have pretty much in the county when it's talking about these different types of structures. I think Jeff Linkus might have a little bit more history in some areas, but still, if Adam is asking the question about the vagueness of the question, then I think that would indicate that this is a good question that's primed for either modification or possible deletion. So I would defer on this one to Adam.
Thank you, Tom. I'll in my survey, I'll come up with some wording that I think maybe states that question a little better. When I first read through it, I thought maybe it was talking about decreasing how we categorize dams so that we don't have as many dams that are regulated, and I would be opposed to that.
Yep.
Let me try to come up with some wording. I'll put it in my survey.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so moving on to goal 3. Actually, before we move on, are people thinking that the format of having one goal per hazard makes sense? So moving forward, say we add a category such as, so the previous plan only included those listed here. So if we add any additional hazards that aren't listed, so if we would add a hazard on on drugs and homelessness, then would you want a goal specifically associated with that hazard? What do you guys think?
I think since Mayor Mongold brought that one up, he might have had a little bit of time to reflect on that. But just my 2 cents would be that if that is the case and it's one goal per type of hazard, I think this would be a good opportunity to at least get that discussion started, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, by including it as part of our plan. Mayor Mongold, do you have any more comments or words on that or thoughts since you entered that into chat?
Not a whole lot. I mean, all of our communities, I think, are seeing the same thing. Some of the common problems here and in Sabina, it's really not as big of an issue as other communities, perhaps, but it's still present. Needles all over the place. We have had, unfortunately, incidences of from suspected drug trafficking locations, individuals throwing human waste into neighboring yards, quite a few blighted properties, properties where There are no utilities and people living there, this sort of thing. Thankfully, here in Sabina, we don't have a huge homeless problem. There are some individuals, but you know, the biggest issue that we see here is, I guess, the repeat offender thing. You know, folks go into the system for whatever reason, they go to treatment, they come back, they do it again. It's a revolving door, and
Mhm.
the fear there is there's a next generation watching this action. You know, it's kind of like a wave. It really is, and you know,
Yeah.
the one problem leads to another, to another, to another, and it brings the entire community down. You know, it really is one of the bigger issues we see here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. If you would think about an overarching goal of how we would, about the types of projects, would you say minimizing the threat, minimizing the effects from of drugs on the community? How would you frame that type of goal?
If I can kind of pop in and kind of leverage an example, when you have a flooding hazard, one of the options you can do is buy property. It happens to be in the floodplain area. And by buying that property at a certain rate, and there's a whole story behind it, you're now taking that from a place where a family would live and converting it into some additional various use type park kind of area and stuff like that. So if you're looking at how you can get a blighted property, whether that's the current effort that a lot of our elected leaders at the county and the city levels are working on right now for some of these blighted issues, there might be a way of being able to leverage a public health component to this. And I believe I see Monica Woods on here. So I'm not sure if Monica might have something that has been occurring to her that might be able to leverage in this, but that might be one way, is to leverage property buyout that is maybe a rental property under a public health type of type aspect. And I'm going to go ahead and pause here just in case Monica wants to pop on and say something, or Pam, or one of the others. Or possibly not.
And that's all right too. Let's see. Yeah, I guess just trying to think about, and I think framing it in terms of public health might be a good perspective to come at it with, in terms of, we have these goals on this survey, expanding awareness and minimizing the effects, minimizing the threat. That's the kind of language that has been used in the overarching themes of the report, and each specific project then fits within, such as the buyout will fit within one of those goals. And that'll make a little bit more sense when we reach the third survey. So yeah, why don't, Mayor Mongold, I know you mentioned writing a little bit more on your survey. So yeah, once we collect all the surveys, provide the feedback that you have and the language that you have, we'll collect all of those, and we'll draft up a list of goals that we'll communicate both with the county EMA, and we'll also have that then in our draft plan that you can all review and provide your feedback on. If you think the language isn't quite right when you review the plan, just let us know. We want this to fit your needs. So then what I'll have you do, I'll just have you go through the next, go through the goals listed here, rather than, we'll get to potential hazards that we'll include in the plan on the next survey. So if you go through, I'll just read them one by one. And if you like the goal, you can just check it off. If you want any amendments, write it in the box provided. And then as you wrap up the survey, there's a spot for new goals and any other comments. And then once we do the second survey, what we'll do is collect all your feedback and again, make a list of draft goals that we'll include in the plan. And if you have any amendments, you can make it at that point. So we'll pick up here at goal 3 to expand awareness about the effects of drought. If you think that is appropriate as it's written, you can just check the box. If you have any changes, you can leave a comment. And goal 4 is very similar, expand awareness about the effects of flooding. If you think it's appropriate as it's written, you can check the box. If you would make any changes, let us know on the line provided. Goal 5 is minimize the effects from hazardous materials. So if you think that's appropriate as it's written, you can check the box. If you'd make any changes, please indicate so on the line provided. Goal 6 is specific to the emerald ash borer. And so it says minimize the threat of the emerald ash borer. One potential that we'll see coming up on the next survey is that we have the option of broadening this category. In the previous plan, it was specific to the emerald ash borer, but we think that it might also be appropriate to open it up to a general category of invasive species. And so if you're thinking, oh, I see a comment in the comment section that is along the same note that emerald ash borer has done its damage. However, there are other devastating invasive species to trees that are present in Ohio from things such as the Asian longhorn beetle. So if you would agree that maybe this could be more broad in terms of just general invasive species, you can indicate that on the line provided as well. And goal 7 says expand awareness about tornadoes and severe storms. So at this point, they're grouped together in the same goal, and that works. If you think that maybe it's more appropriate to have for each of those hazards to have its own goal, we could do that as well. Just let us know what your thoughts are on the line.
Hey, Tom and others, this is Tony Nye. As we look at climate change and discussions we have in the agricultural world, our storms are more intense. So we may not have more rain or more situations, but as over time has taken place, we've seen more intensity. Does there need to be some added awareness to potential of storms, severe or tornadoes? I'm just throwing it out there for discussion. As we see from an agricultural sector, we're seeing more and more intense storms, dropping more rain at one time in a short period of time, more hail, more wind, those kinds of things. I'll be quiet.
That was a wonderful entry. And if Brandon Peliquin from the National Weather Service gave you $5 for that little opening opportunity to say a few words, you did it brilliantly. Brandon is on the call. I'm kind of going to babble for just a moment so he can kind of prep a few things, maybe in the back of his head. I believe that Brandon might be able to provide a little bit of information to be able to shift the focus, or at least narrow the focus of this. But I think what Tony brings up is perfect. So I'm going to shut up now and say, Brandon, if you'd like to pop in and take a few moments and have a go at this one, we'd be greatly appreciative.
Okay, Tom, can you hear me okay?
You're a little soft, but we can hear you.
Okay, well, I'll try and speak up then through my computer. Good to see everyone virtually today. And the thing with weather, there's a lot of different hazards. Even within severe thunderstorms, there can be hail hazards and impacts. There can be flash flooding hazards and impacts. There can be straight line wind damage and impacts, and also tornado hazarded impacts. So you could almost have a whole lot of different divisions just within severe thunderstorms, and then you have winter weather as well as another animal to be dealt with. I think it was 2 or 3 Novembers ago, we had a pretty bad ice storm event that had high impact too. So I guess the question is, how specific do you want to be? I think it's a good suggestion maybe to separate those two from that goal, but you could probably add a couple of additional ones as well, because I certainly agree, and there's data to strongly suggest that over the last 20 or so years, the frequency and the intensity of all these different types of weather hazards has increased. And I think we've certainly seen that throughout Southwest Ohio and Clinton County as well. So I would certainly be in favor of, you know, maybe separating those two and potentially even adding a couple of those, but it's just a matter of how specific do you want to be.
And I really like that. And the way it occurred to me was, instead of saying expand awareness about tornadoes and severe storms, because as you pointed out, there's a lot of different items, maybe something about bending it a little bit to where it says promote seasonal storm awareness and preparedness to an ever-changing weather pattern, or something along those lines. I wasn't done typing. I was still kind of listening when I was kind of typing, but something to where it allows for the seasonal portion, so we can then focus on, like you said, you get the winter snowstorms, you get the ice storms, and so forth. Thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly think that's one direction. I mean, I think you're looking for something that encapsulates a lot of these different types of hazards and their impacts, and maybe just generically calling it severe weather or hazardous weather, something like that within the goal is the way to go.
That sounds like really great feedback. And on that note, the next survey that we do asks specifically which hazards you want included in the plan. And so maybe at that point, by determining which hazards and how we separate the hazards, this list of goals will also make it'll fit that a little bit better. So moving on to goal 8, related to terrorism, it says increase protection from possible terrorism events. Are there any comments or thoughts on that goal?
I'm trying to think how that might work in this county, and the only thing that comes to mind would be something agricultural focused. So I think that might be something along the lines of more of a Tony Nye question, or maybe a Colonel Prickett if there's something else that comes to mind. But I'll point the microphone first over to Tony Nye to see what his thoughts are.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, from a terrorism standpoint, as you've been aware with some of the things that have been occurring in the livestock area, Neil Ronimus is also on this call as well as a producer. You know, we are seeing more events across the country that would fall under the category of terrorism as it relates to animal agriculture or even just agriculture in general. Currently, because of the situation with COVID and how it presented issues in the food chain sector of livestock production, there has been more emphasis across the country to be aware of possible acts of terrorism on farms, and different aspects of that. So I think heightening the awareness for the potential, as these things are not just in Iowa, where it's #1 state for hog production or things like that. It's becoming countrywide, and we're even seeing it in other countries. So I think just heightening the awareness, maybe in time adding more information that associations like the National Pork Producers Council or the National Beef Council or other livestock or agricultural commodity groups are providing for farmers, and putting it out there somehow in a format that it makes aware the average consumer of agricultural products, not only the farm side, but the consumer side. So if anybody else has got any thoughts, I'll be quiet.
Colonel Prickett?
I wanted to point out on the hazard overview document that we shared, the bottom row, middle column has a summary, a definition of all the types of terrorism that we like to include in the plan. So we include things like active aggressor, biological terrorism, chemical terrorism, cyber terrorism, and agroterrorism. So if there are any comments on other aspects, agroterrorism just might be the most applicable to your county. We consider all of those as well.
Yeah, and I would also just like to point out that we are seeing cyber terrorism go up as well, especially targeting rural counties and small towns. We're getting blackmail from private information, as well as election interference in rural counties. So that might also be something to consider.
Good thoughts. And we'll continue to take your comments on that kind of thing, especially as we move on to the next survey. But we'll just wrap up here with goal 9, expand awareness about the effects from winter storms. If you would have any modifications to that, let us know on the line provided. But if you like it as it's written, you can just check the box. And then I'll also give you some time now to think about new goals that you might like included, and provide any additional comments that you have related to this survey. I'll give you the next few minutes to kind of wrap up your thoughts on this, and then we'll move on to the hazard priority survey, if you haven't already done that online. If you have any comments or questions, just let us know in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. We have a question on if you're mailing these surveys in, when do you need them to get to me or Tom? And that is a great question. We definitely need them ahead of the next meeting, which is August 5th. So if you could plan on getting them in the mail to us within the next week, that would be very helpful. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the next survey, the hazard priority survey, survey 2.
Yeah. Sorry, can I interrupt? Before we move on, I just wanted to let people know if they're having trouble meeting that deadline for mailing, they can also call us so we can go through the surveys with them.
Yes, absolutely. If you can't get it in the mail within the next week, or if you have any specific questions and want to walk through these surveys together more on a one-on-one level, we are happy to do that. Just shoot us an email. Our contact information will be at the end of this presentation. And I know a lot of you already have my email. because you've RSVP'd to me, which is excellent. Thank you all for doing that. So yeah, that would be great. And Tom included the EMA's address in the chat, which is 1645 Davids Drive in Wilmington, and the zip code is 45177. And so if you just want to email them or mail them to Tom, he can forward them to us here at Burton Planning Services. And I'll have that address provided at the end as well, I believe. If not, we'll repeat it again. All right, so the hazard priority survey, again, the first thing I'm going to have you do is write your name and organization at the top of the survey. So this survey asks you to consider all of the hazards that were included in the 2016 plan and rate them on a scale of 0 to 5. If a hazard should not be studied, if you don't think it's important or significant to your community, you can mark it as 0. If you think it poses the greatest threat to your community and you want it to be the highest, prioritize the highest in the plan, you would mark it a 5. So we're asking you to rate each hazard on a scale of 0 to 5 based on how important that hazard is to your community. And importance to us, that means its risk level, its threat level. So if you find that dam failure, it poses some threat to your community, but it's really not very high, you can mark it like a 2 or a 3. If you don't think that it really poses any threat to your community, but you think it still needs to be assessed, you can mark it a 1. If you don't want it included in the plan, mark it a 0. So the first 12 hazards listed here were included in your plan in 2016. Then we have some additional hazards here, 13 through 18. These are additional hazards that we could include in the plan. So we include things like extreme temperatures, both extreme heat and extreme cold, mine subsidence, and invasive species. And as I mentioned before, you did include specifically, where'd it go? Insect infestation in the previous plan. But we could broaden that to include not just insects, but also non-native species, including plants as well. So in the comments section on the second page or on the back of that survey, please let us know if you would prefer that we include just insects or if we include invasive species as a whole. We could also include epidemic or pandemic, which is, a hot topic right now, and utility failure and wildfire. Those are other common things to include. Utility failure could also be incorporated into severe storms, whether they're summer storms or wind events, tornadoes. And if you think that it would be appropriate to split wind events and tornadoes, let us know. We just want your feedback, your unique thoughts to let us know how to shape this report. So again, we'll rate each, I'll let you have the next few minutes to rate each hazard on a scale of 0 to 5, with 5 being that hazard poses the greatest threat to your community, 1 being you want to include it in the plan, but it's not significant to your community, and 0 being do not include in the plan. So I'll have you rate each of those hazards, and I'll give you the next 5 minutes or so to get that done. And if you have any comments, please add those on the back of the survey or the second page. We'd really appreciate it. And if you finish this, feel free to take a short break now. We're moving into a slightly longer survey next. So if you need a quick break, now would be a time to do it. I say we'll use the next few minutes for questions and a short break, and we'll reconvene here in about 5 minutes. If you are someone who's joined in partway through the meeting and you would like to, and you haven't signed in using one of the 4 methods, let me pull up the ways that you can sign in. Please use one of these 4 methods to sign in, either using the SurveyMonkey link provided in the chat, or emailing myself or Tom to let us know that you attended. You can also just put your name in the chat if you haven't used one of these methods. Or you can, if you are calling in using a phone, you can text me at 614-406-7775 with your name, email, and your job title and employer. And I'll leave it open for questions in the next few minutes. Please do not hesitate to ask if you have any questions. We have a question about the differentiation between a hazard that is likely to happen, but it's not as damaging, and a hazard that is not as likely to happen, but it's catastrophic if it does happen. And that is something that we don't assess using this survey. It's a very great question. It's something that we assess when we consider the damages associated, when we look up the historical data on each hazard. So we definitely take it into account in the plan, but for this survey, we're asking you to kind of average those out in your minds, so that way we can prioritize these hazards in terms of all of the projects that are associated with these hazards will be put into an implementation plan. So if you prioritize tornadoes as a 5, and let's say, extreme temperatures as a 3, the projects associated with tornadoes would be given a higher priority number than those with extreme temperatures. So I know they are kind of 2 different fields to think about, but we're asking your average impression of each hazard event or each type of hazard.
So Anna, are you asking people to concentrate on frequency, what happens the most often, or which one has the highest severity when it does happen in our area?
I would say which has the highest severity or poses the greatest threat to your community. And we had a question come through about possibly considering rail traffic in hazard events. I would like to know a little bit more about your thoughts about rail traffic in the community and how specifically what type of threat that would pose to your community.
Well, since this person has the title engineer in his name, and unfortunately it looks like he picked the right time to walk away from his chair, but when Jeff Linkus comes back, I think that might be a good time to kind of point the microphone over his direction. So Adam, if you happen to see Jeff walking in the hallways, if you might be able to urge him back to his chair, we might be able to get that question back to him. And there he is. So the question going to Mr. Jeff Linkus, our county engineer, is talking on the topic of rail traffic. Is that something that should be brought up as a concern or a possible threat? And if so, how might that be shaped for this conversation? Jeff?
Are you concerned about rail traffic or the type of material that's being transported by rail?
We'll leave that as speaker's choice, if you might be able to touch on both.
The rail traffic concern is not the amount. I mean, there is concern obviously at crossings. That's maybe a different thing. But I'm thinking the knowledge of what is on those rail cars is important to our mitigation plan. We may not even know what's going through our county, and that might be something that Tom needs to address. But some of the stuff they're hauling is obviously not a problem. They're hauling, they haul stone just about every day out of Melvin to Cincinnati. But if there's any hazardous materials or anything like that, I think that's an issue that we need to allow for in the mitigation plan.
So we do have a hazardous materials section that we'll be doing as part of this plan. But it sounds like what you're thinking about is a commodity flow study, which will actually look at everything that is going through the county, through truck traffic, as well as rail. So that is normally a mitigation action that we include in the plan, is follow up. A full commodity flow study should be done. And that sounds like it'll answer most of the questions you had.
Yep, and you say rail and truck all be inclusive in that.
Yes.
Yep.
And air too, if I'm not mistaken.
You can include, yeah, you can include any sort of transportation that you'd like in a commodity flow study. Air travel is possible, yeah. Do you have significant materials transportation by air in the county?
As a matter of fact, we do.
And this is a good time to turn the microphone over to Mr. Dan Evers, who's with our Clinton County Port Authority.
Part of the issue with the rail is the.
Sorry, had to find myself.
No worries, Dan.
Thank you. Yes, we have significant air cargo activity
It would be the
in
same.
the county at the Wilmington Air Park. That includes scheduled flights of consumer-based cargo through Amazon Air. Nominally, I guess included in that would also be the fact that we have a international maintenance and repair operation here, and so intermittently parts and components are delivered here via air as well.
Would you consider any of those to be hazardous materials?
I would not. Though not to be trite, but I suppose it depends on the specific definition being used.
We do have several organizations that are tenants to the area, whether they're the warehousing areas or actually working on the airfield itself, that do tier 2 reports every year in filings.
Yeah, it sounds like
there's some pretty strict FAA regs on what can be transported as well.
And it sounds like there are some unknowns maybe right now with what's coming in by air. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. We don't know specifically what's in the Amazon cargo, for example. We simply know that it comports with FAA requirements and restrictions.
So if we step back a second, we had a question earlier about when we're looking at transportation, are we looking at just hazardous materials and materials transporting? Are we also looking at traffic accidents and that sort of thing? It sounds like most of the concerns are coming from hazardous materials. Is that a fair assumption?
I think that would be a fair assessment because we also have significant quantities of agricultural related chemicals as well.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think that that conversation is really important to consider, and I think for the most part we can incorporate most of those into the hazardous materials section, and then provide some recommendations on projects such as a commodity flow study that can be completed in order to enhance knowledge on what could possibly happen as a result of depending on the type of hazardous material incident. If there are any final comments on that subject, I welcome those. Otherwise, I think just for time's sake, we'll move on to the third and final survey, which is just a little bit longer in length. So hopefully we can run through that unless there are any other comments or questions on that second survey. All right, and as Brett mentioned in the chat, feel free to continue having some conversations. We will, if we have any specific questions about that section, as we're drafting the risk assessment, we'll reach out to those involved in that conversation just to kind of further enhance our knowledge on what might be best for the county and discuss potential projects. But we'll go ahead and move on to this third and final survey. This is the previous mitigation actions status survey, and Brett has posted the link to the online version of this survey in the chat. So as part of each hazard mitigation plan, the county is tasked with developing a list of mitigation actions, and we refer to any projects as mitigation actions. So these are mitigation actions or projects that can help prepare your communities and residents for hazard events. And we're looking to implement these projects to lessen the impact of each hazard event. So as part of this process, the status of each mitigation action that was included in the plan in 2016 needs to be determined. So this survey, we have a table of the mitigation actions that were included in the previous plan. And as I mentioned before, each of these projects are associated with the goals that we had mentioned. So goal 1, there are several projects listed to contribute towards reaching that goal. So each mitigation action is listed in the first column. So that's the project. The second column, jurisdictions, lists which communities identified themselves as wanting to participate in that project. The third column, the status column, this is what the ultimate goal of completing the survey. This is the information we need. We need to know if that project was completed, deleted, deferred, unchanged, or ongoing. And if, say, for instance, the project was completed, we need to know when that project was completed approximately. If the project should be deleted from the plan. We need to know why. If the project remains, if it hasn't had progress on it since the previous plan, we say unchanged. And we need to know why how progress hasn't been made. If it was deferred, say funding wasn't available and you determined that you wanted to reapproach the subject in this plan, just let us know why. You can just say funding wasn't available. Ongoing, this is say for something that needs to be done every year. If you check certain tornado sirens, that kind of thing, if there's ongoing maintenance, you would check that, and then you would give an approximate percent complete. If it's something that is done annually, you can just say it's 50% complete, and then in the comments section, write completed annually each year. Or that's redundant. You can just say completed annually. Are there any questions on those instructions? I know it's kind of intense. We're asking a lot of information, but this is really critical for the next plan. So I will say that each jurisdiction has its own version of this survey. So if you complete it using SurveyMonkey, if you complete it online and you filter if you type in that you're from Blanchester, it will filter it to only include the actions that have your community listed. We are going to go through the entire survey together now. So if your jurisdiction is not listed, it won't be on your survey, and you don't need to think that we gave you the wrong survey. Your survey for your community only includes the actions that are applicable to your community. So we'll go ahead and get started. I encourage anyone who has any information on if this has been done in your community to unmute yourself, and go ahead and contribute to the conversation. This survey goes the fastest when we have a lot of participation. So hopefully we can get you guys out of here by 4:30, and we can just kind of go through these one by one and let us know what the status is. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Make sure that you have your name and position listed at the top of the survey. That's very important for us. Okay.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So every one of these has a jurisdiction of Clinton County, and of course, with the county engineer's office, we're part of Clinton County. But I'm looking at these questions and these goals, thinking that not all of us can answer, even the ones that are specific to us.
Yes.
Because we're not sure that these have all been done. So trying to go through every one of these with each jurisdiction, this could take a long time. And I'm wondering if this is something more that Tom should be going through to say whether these have been completed, or as you said, if there's just a certain village or city that has or has not completed these. But if we try to go through all these, I'm not sure you're going to get through them all.
And Jeff, that's a good point. However, you've been here since Daniel Boone and Simon Kitten probably tracked across the countrysides. I've been here for a year, so I may know some components, but I think you definitely have a lot more of a grasp. So what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm noting certain items, such as my number 2, create a clear written policy, designated chain of command, listing names, job titles of persons responsible for making decisions and so forth. And I noted that is an ongoing, and it's part of the county emergency operations plan requirement. So that's the direction I'm taking on that one, but some of the other ones I may not have a whole lot of history or knowledge of. And that's where I would defer to your expertise.
I'm just wondering if you want us to maybe look at these offline, because trying to get through them, if you said by 4:30, I got on SurveyMonkey and started to try to go through them, and I don't have answers for Clinton County. I'm I'm not sure who does on some of these. It'll be partly Tom, it'll be partly commissioners, it'll be partly us, it'll be partly health department. Each one's specific to maybe a certain area. That's why I'm just, you can,
Yeah.
Tom, you can tell me that's not going to work, but it's going to be hard to go through these with all these jurisdictions.
Well, and that's
It-
partially why we do it now as a group. So that way those who don't have any idea, someone might be available who does know. And SurveyMonkey, I think, will require an answer to every action.
That's what I was having a problem with. It's requiring an answer, and I don't have answers. So if you do it online here and somebody has an answer, but when you have status and then you have remarks that say when, why, and percent complete, that's where I'm wondering if we're going to be able to complete this, because I don't know the answers. And like you said, Tom's going to have to do some research on some of these.
I think it's also important to point out that it's common for people to not have all the information when we ask them to fill out these surveys. So sometimes we are asking for a best guess if that information is unattainable.
So maybe what I'm hearing is don't try to go on SurveyMonkey and answer all these questions, but you'll do them here and people can pipe in of the things they know.
We would like each person participating to complete a survey, but we'll go through it together so that way, as you complete your survey, you can provide your own specific knowledge that might not come through on in our discussion, but also you can get answers to things you might have questions on.
So as I look at surveys from my world, if they're not applicable to the person filling out the survey, will that not alter? I mean, you know, if like in the last person speaking, doesn't have an answer, you don't leave a field there to convey that. You're making them answer something that isn't accurate. So to me, the survey tool is inaccurate at this point.
We will always defer to the expert on that project. However, we are just looking for as many opportunities as possible to collect as much information as possible. And perhaps, Tom, you might have some additional thoughts on this process. Perhaps if you want to break up into smaller groups and take time over the next week to complete this at your own pace, that is perfectly acceptable. We don't need this from you at this exact moment, but we do need it within the next week or so. I'm open to other ideas. I'd just like to make sure that we're getting the best feedback possible.
I would propose that if you're able to answer the question, answer the question. If you're unable to answer the question, in the box below, just put parentheses, not my subject matter area of expertise, or would defer to the information provided by, say, the health district or whoever. On quite a few of them, I'm actually going through identifying what plans or requirements that they're actually covered under. And I think this might be a good opportunity to look at some of those items as they're listed and maybe look at maybe reworded versions. So I wouldn't get too hung up on it as being something you have to complete right here and right now, but there would need to be some sort of reply back so we'd have something to start piecing the puzzle together.
Is it my understanding that this survey is only available through SurveyMonkey though?
No, there are also physical versions available through the website.
Okay.
Brett, if you
because
wouldn't mind.
the SurveyMonkey tool is invalid because it doesn't allow you to leave it blank if it's a true SurveyMonkey tool.
Correct. It will not allow you to leave it blank, which is why we're requesting that if you would please just complete the status to your best knowledge, or as we go through it as a group, if someone provides the answer that you need to know, that you aren't sure of, then you can write it. And then again, in the comment box, as Tom said, then you can just write not my area of expertise, and we'll defer to someone whose area of expertise it is.
I have a question. I'm not sure I follow along. Just looking at the one at the top, it says collaborate with county, okay? And you've listed all the jurisdictions. If one of those jurisdictions, the answer is completed, and one of them it is ongoing, and one of it is deferred, how do you find that at the, I'm not sure how you get to the end of the line and understand that you can check all those boxes because all of them might be accurate for each.
That's a very good question. Yeah. So this survey specifically, again, we have survey versions for each jurisdiction. So this one listed is specifically for the county. So whoever is responding for the county will take that. There are versions for Blanchester, Clarksville, Martinsville. So whoever is filling it out for that jurisdiction, we will take that answer from that jurisdiction, if that makes sense. This is just a list of all participating, and we'll go through, this is the county's version of the survey. All of the actions that, like the county is the overarching entity, so the county is included on each action. So all actions included in the previous plan are in this survey, but all of these actions are not included in each jurisdiction survey, if that makes sense. They're filtered based on which actions the county or the jurisdiction wanted to participate in 5 years ago. So I think if we go ahead and just go one by one, I think that's the best way to go about it. If you just don't know, you don't know. We can't ask you to know something that you don't. We're just asking for a best guess. If you don't know, I'll say this, just say mark it as deferred and just say not my area of expertise. And that will get around the system, and we will then defer to someone who it is their area of expertise. But we'll go ahead and get started. If you do know, just go ahead and chime in. I'll leave a little bit of time for people to chime in. If we don't get any feedback, we'll just go ahead and move on to the next one. We're not trying to make this extra challenging. We're just trying to get as much information as we can. So again, we appreciate your time and taking the time to participate. Okay, so this first batch of actions are associated with the first goal, which is increasing public information and awareness about hazards that affect Clinton County. So the first action is collaborate with county extension services and private sector interests to purchase or otherwise create and distribute information dealing with disasters and how people can prepare or recover from them. So would anyone in the county have an idea of the status of this?
If I could ramrod that one, I would say that it was ongoing. Basically, I believe this would be an ongoing requirement, parenthesis, annual, parenthesis, as people move, their conditions change, etc.
Okay, thank you. So then we'll move on to number 2, create a clear written policy designating chain of command, listing names and job titles of persons responsible for making decisions, etc.
If I can ramrod this one also, I put that one as being completed. It's part of the annual requirement for the county emergency operations plan.
So is that something that we will need to continue since it is annual?
It's an annual requirement, so I guess if you wanted to redefine it as continuing or ongoing, then that could be something, because people do change in positions, people get elected out of office, new people come in, things like that.
Okay. We'll mark that as ongoing, but if it's something that you don't think is necessary to continue to monitor in this plan, we can discuss that, Tom. There are some of these things that are just ongoing, and it's not necessarily a project that needs to be included in the plan because you do them anyway. So when we go through all of our final list of actions, Tom, if there are things like that that you feel it's appropriate to pull out, we can do that then.
Copy.
Okay. Next action, develop specific instructions for shutting down equipment and production sites outside the facility and a process to account for all employees after an evacuation.
I put that one as ongoing, required as part of the site safety plan, especially for extremely hazardous material sites, parentheses, part of the emergency operations plan, period, annual inclusion as part of the tier 2 reporting.
Perfect, thank you. Procedures for employees responsible for shutting down critical operations before evacuating the facility.
I put that also as ongoing, part of the health and safety plan for that site and governing laws, as well as annual required exercises / drills.
Thank you. Okay. Next action, specific training and practices scheduled and equipment requirements for persons responsible for rescue operations, medical duties, hazardous responses, firefighting, and other responses specific to worksite.
I put that down as completed as required by governing laws. If you're going to be certified to be able to perform those type of operations, those have to be completed first and documented.
Great. Okay, develop a program whereby emergency management teams trained for potential emergencies and the containment of those emergencies are created.
I checked the box deleted because we do not have CERT teams at this location.
Okay. Would anyone else have anything different to say? And if you mark it, you can mark it differently on your own survey too. We'll just go ahead and keep going. Update the county's emergency operation plan and aid in creating standard operating procedures for each department or agency. How frequently is the county EOP updated?
Every year it has to either go up for either review or a no change, and we have submitted 5 years in a row, I believe, of no change. So this year it actually has to be modified or changed, which I'm currently rewriting at this time.
Okay. Create and distribute informational materials to homeowners, informing them about disasters and how to recover.
EMA is currently working on a redesign of its website, so that is listed as ongoing.
Okay. Coordinate between Clinton counties and the municipal building and zoning offices to encourage the adoption of updated building codes. All right, and that's okay if no one knows on the phone. We'll just keep moving.
I think the building codes are staying updated.
Okay. Great. Create a public information and education program that informs residents and officials of post-disaster strategies. Is this something that might be incorporated into the website redesign?
We're working that into a few different items. I'm just a little slow typing.
Okay.
Anna, before we move on to the next action, I want to make sure, are people going to be able to reference what you and Tom are filling out later? Can we post that somewhere for them? This completed survey.
Yeah, we can make this available on the website.
Sure, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll move on. There's only one project associated with the goal related to decreasing the dam hazard level. And this project says coordinate with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to update dam safety plans and increase inspection rates on at-risk dams. What types of coordination occur with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers related to the dam safety plans?
I don't think have anything with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. However, ODNR does require inspections of dams.
And we also purchased their sunscreen, right?
Yeah.
Too soon?
So I'm gonna also leave a comment here about
The Army Corps may inspect the Callan Lake Dam. I don't know whose jurisdiction that actually falls under. All the other dams are inspected on I believe it's a 3-year basis by ODNR.
okay, great. All right, so we're moving in.
This is Doug. It's actually 5 years that ODNR does the reinspection. Every 5 years.
Okay, every 5 years. Okay.
That sounds right, Rick. Thank you.
So the third goal was related to the effects of drought. And so the first project is create a public information and education program highlighting the responsibilities of residents towards water conservation and resource use.
This is an area I'm going to have to defer to either Rick or Travis on this, because that's pretty much their meat and potatoes. Either of you want to take that?
Yeah, we had that. As part of our plan. The first plan is that's a EPA thing we have to do every year.
So you would put that as an ongoing annual requirement?
Right.
Okay. Oops. Okay. So then the second one is coordinate with subject matter experts on best practices to minimize drought impacts.
That almost seems a little redundant for number 12 almost.
Yeah.
I would say on that one would be ongoing because your best management practices are ever changing as more technology is figured out depending on the practices that they're trying to incorporate. So I would just put in, ongoing on that.
That sounds good. All right, so the next goal is expand awareness about the effects from flooding. So the first one is create a public information and education program to sensitize residents to the floodplain and the benefits of preserving these areas.
I think that's probably more of an Adam question. Laugh it up, Jeff.
Are there specific educational materials that are sent out to residents related to the flood zone?
We did some updates to or we're in the process of doing some updates to the flood zone with FEMA. They're publishing some new maps, and there was quite a bit of educational material went out as part of that, public meetings and so forth. That's ongoing, and it's only specific to certain portions of the county. The FEMA materials available to residents are becoming more and more available online and easier to find and get hold of.
By chance, would either of those two areas be parts of the county that also have poor internet access?
They were limited to the very northern part of the county from 68 West, a little bit inside the city of Wilmington, and a little bit in and around Blanchester Village.
It's not correlated to internet access, Tom.
All right, no, I just wondering because I was thinking Clarksville, and I know Clarksville's got some issues.
The map updates were really related to FEMA did a risk map 6-7 years ago, and part of that risk map thing, Warren County and Greene County needed an update to the Little Miami floodplain mapping, and we kind of were collateral damage in that, and they had to remap a little bit of Clinton County to make their projects work. So that's where those updates originated, how they came about.
All right, we'll move on to the next action here. Coordinate with county agencies to modify policies and/or regulations allowing development to occur in floodplains.
I would say that our county agencies are coordinated, zoning, building, engineer, soil and water, map office, health department, and that we have regulations that will put restrictions on any development within floodplains.
Do you think that that could be marked as completed then?
I think you still have some, the villages are probably the weak link when it comes to development inside of floodplains.
That's true. But I'm not sure that that's going to happen.
Okay. Well, we'll mark it
It's completed in the county.
for the county. Yep. Mm-hmm. And we'll leave that open to feedback from the villages then too. Okay, moving on. Develop a program involving public information and education to encourage donation of stream corridors and those areas adequately maintained free of debris.
Don't know who's doing that. Maybe Parks, the County Park District.
Okay. We'll leave that open for their comment then. So we'll move on. Update the base floodplain mapping to better allow the user to determine the precise floodplain. Was that included in some of that previous mapping?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think so. We've got a pretty good layer on our GIS to be able to determine the floodplain.
Is that something that you would like to update in the next 5 years again, or should we just mark it as completed?
There's always going to be small updates, and they just did the one that Adam talked about where they revisited several areas. So I don't see FEMA coming back in the next 5 years, but there are small parcels that can be changed. I'm guessing completed for now. I mean, Adam, they didn't indicate that they were going to come back and do anything in the near future, did they?
We've got the best mapping that we're going to have for the next foreseeable future.
Okay, great. When do you think the last round of updates was complete?
It's ongoing at the moment. We've got some maps that are out for public comment at the moment.
Okay.
Hopefully they will be adopted late 2020.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to the hazardous materials goal. And as Brett mentioned, we can include an action about a commodity flow study. It looks like that was included in the previous plan. So I would assume that that has been unchanged then, that one has not been done in the last 5 years.
Correct. Marked as unchanged, desire to conduct as part of a Southwest Ohio effort with regional county EMA partners.
Okay. All right, so then increase the training level of responders within Clinton County at the awareness, operation, and technician levels.
That's an ongoing effort with all the fire districts, and I am still waiting to get some more information so that we can reach out to one of the universities that we have in the state that does some free training and see if we can get something set up in the fall.
Okay.
But right now, COVID's having an unintended impact on a lot of that.
Of course, yeah. Okay, so then we'll move on to the next one. Update and improve the level of hazardous material response equipment available in the county.
We have made improvements through a memorandum of agreement with the Greater Cincinnati Hazmat Response Unit. And we have also restocked the LEPC response trailer in 2019.
Okay, so you would mark that as completed?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so then we'll move on to actions related to the emerald ash borer. Decrease the infestation level of the emerald ash borer by applying sprays.
Tony, is that a moot point now?
That's a moot point.
So we'll delete that out then?
I would say so.
Okay. Clear infested trees that are damaged by the emerald ash borer. Is that also? Sorry, go ahead.
I believe it's ongoing.
Okay. Would you have a rough estimate of percent completion of that?
Wow, that's a hard one because on private property, there's a huge percent that's still there. On public property, we made quite an effort, but if you look, every time there's a storm, those dead trees are falling down. So I don't even know if it's 50%.
Okay.
Tony?
Well, why don't we'll put 40% then. It's just a rough estimate. All right, so then we'll move on to the section about tornadoes and severe storms. The first is install warning sirens in areas of dense, small populations.
For that one, I think we can actually mark that this one is complete. The larger population areas have alarms. The problem is some of the more rural locations, the older re-gifted alarms or sirens that were in use in Wilmington. So at some point in time, those are kind of fade off. The reliance of outdoor sirens and the way the network is currently set up is not ideal. In other words, tornado warning we had in the very southeast corner of Clinton County on the 10th of June sent a countywide tornado warning. However, we had no tornadoes in this area, and the only area that was at risk was a couple of miles by a couple of miles, very small.
When would you say that was completed?
It would have had to have been one during the during the previous administration, but
Okay.
I don't have a date. I can try to find out when the city of Wilmington bought all their new sirens.
Okay. We'll move on here. Distribute NOAA radios, NOAA weather radios.
To who?
That is the question that was not included in the previous plan.
And
Hey,
I think we can
Jeff.
mark that as complete, yes.
Yeah, Jeff,
Yeah.
was that part of the radio handout they did even at the county fair too?
They started to do some of that back before Tom, but I don't know what the goal was on that because they didn't have that many. Is that
Yeah,
what you're
I
thinking?
would just, yeah, I would put complete then on that.
Okay. Was that the county fair of last year?
2 years ago, 3 years ago.
2018.
Yep.
right, coordinate with building code enforcement responsibilities to create an improved wind resistance requirement for buildings.
Never heard of that one. I mean, they've updated their, Warren County does the building inspections, and they've kept up with the current building standards, which include better, hurricane clips and things like that, but I'm not sure if that's what this is talking about.
Okay. We'll leave that open and see what sort of feedback we get from people attending other meetings and in communication. All right, coordinate with property owners to determine the feasibility and suitability for structures as protective shelters within mobile home parks.
Tom?
I'm trying to think about how to diplomatically word that. There is an appetite from residents who live in these locations for something like this. There may not be an appetite for giving up the lot space and having to do a percentage of what might be required to fund the project. So it is a good conversational topic that I think will remain out there as long as there are trailer parks. But at this time, I don't see that as something that would likely be very fruitful in the next 5 years.
Well said.
Is it an action that you want to keep in the next plan?
I would not be heartbroken if it fell off, along with the outdoor tornado sirens, because I think that's just a black hole.
Okay. This was the action you said? Oh, well, that was marked as completed, so that will, yeah, okay. All right, so we'll move on to goal 8, increase protection from possible terrorism events. So the first project associated with this goal is develop an informational brochure to distribute about different types of terrorism and how they might affect Clinton County. Has any type of promotional or informational materials been distributed about terrorism? And is that something you'd want to keep in the plan going forward?
I've been providing some stuff on social media every Thursday, I believe it is, that pops up, or Tuesdays and Thursdays, talking about if you see something, say something. But that only covers certain things. I think Tony and I actually had some of the different items earlier on the agri part, but I don't think we identified if there's any materials that would go along with that. Tony?
On the livestock side, there are some materials that come from some of our national organizations, more of awareness type information, and they're ever changing. That would be an ongoing thing as more different types of terrorism are identified. But from the ag sector, there again, they are ever changing and updated and can be made available to producers and producer families, or anyone for that matter.
Do you think that this is important to continue doing in the, to continue doing going forward?
I would say let's re-engage on that one. And Brett also pulled up a very important thing. I believe we're actually over a lot of time. So I think if there's any roundup notes that individuals may be able to go through and kind of complete the rest of their own, But right now we're kind of a little bit past our 4:30 point.
Okay.
If,
Well, then,
sorry, I was going to say, if anyone wants to keep working, I think we'll be good until 5 o'clock, since our next meeting is not till 5:30. So we can continue if people want to stay on.
I'm in.
it's not a requirement. So we'll go ahead, we'll keep going as a team. If you have to drop off, you can go ahead and do that. We are so thankful and grateful for you taking the time to participate. I know some of these surveys can be a bit laborious, but we really do appreciate it. If you have any follow-up questions, I'll post my email in the chat. Feel free to email me directly or post more questions in the chat. And again, thank you for your participation. If you've completed these surveys by hand, you can mail them to the EMA. And if you prefer to, you can also scan them in and email them to us. That works as well. But I'll let anyone else drop off that wants to. But thank you. All right, well, we'll go ahead and continue on, those who are still on the call. The next action here is develop a presentation to give to social organizations and schools about terrorism and what to look for.
Which one are we on again? Oh, just replying to a bunch of text.
Develop a presentation to give to civil organizations and schools about terrorism and what to look for.
I put down unchanged, consider leveraging other organizations that already have these materials and programs and act more as a facilitator to kind of get them. That way we're not having to create as much stuff. We're just basically sharing or enabling.
Good idea. All right, next one, determine what is needed to solidify network security from internal and external entities.
That is ongoing. I have brought that up as a topic earlier to the commissioners back in January, and we need to work on our policies and some training at the county level for our employees. And I don't know if you probably don't want to write this part down so that we don't get kind of messed over like Fayette County did.
Okay. Right, so the next one is increase guard presence at county facilities.
I think that would be something to either delete or remove or modify, because I believe we're looking at some other options like leveraging camera systems and CCTV, as opposed to having to hire, train, equip, certify, and cover liability for additional personnel.
Great. Why don't, yeah, we'll delete out this, but maybe we'll add in another action related to digitizing it. That sounds good. All right, obtain additional detection equipment to respond to possible terrorist attacks.
Unless something has changed in the threat, I don't think we're a high-risk location for radiological or chemical or biological. I think if we're going to have anything, it may be naturally occurring, or it might be someone trying to get anhydrous ammonia or whatever to create a little bit of meth, and because of that, there's a release. But as for going out and spending a lot of money for equipment that we can't maintain and have personnel teams that are trained to respond, I think that once again, that's another black hole area you can just throw money into and not get a good result out of. So I would delete that.
Okay.
Unless someone else has a different opinion.
All right, well then we'll move on to the final two projects. So this is create a public information and education campaign for informational dissemination about snow emergency alerts, snow levels, and cornstick windbreaks.
Colonel Prickett has stepped off the call, otherwise he'd be a great person to throw in front of that bus. But I think that's pretty much an ongoing type of situation because we get new employees, new people coming in through the county and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom, I think it is ongoing. Every year we do a winter meeting and try to disseminate to the paper. And I'm betting several people are wondering what the heck cornstick windbreaks are, but that would be trying to leave a row or two of corn stalks so that they act as a fence to when the wind blows. But that doesn't happen a lot either. So, but yes, ongoing.
Great. All right, and then the last project is improve barriers for boundary markings during snow removal by upgrading and replacing damaged fencing.
I think the state may be doing a little more fencing, but we're not doing much. A lot of farmers are removing fences, so the snow fences, if that's what they're talking about, or the state's actually done some planting of trees to keep that to act as snow fence.
So Jeff, would you mark that as completed or recommend that for deleted?
I don't see us doing anything else with that, so maybe deleted.
Okay. All right, well, that is the survey. So I'll go ahead and save this out and we will save it or upload it to the website. So that way you can reference what we've discussed. Again, some of those we skipped just to see what other types of feedback we could get from people who weren't on the call, or if you want to take your survey and discuss it with some colleagues and then send us more comments or send us an additional survey with more comments. We'd love to just get as much feedback on these as possible. We really appreciate you taking the time to help us complete these surveys and learn more about hazard mitigation planning. With that, that's all I have. If anyone has any specific questions, feel free to ask it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. And Tom, if you have any other closing comments, I'll turn it over to you.
No, I agree. I just want to thank everyone for the time and the contributions because all this helps. So I realize in some aspects this may feel like whipping a dead horse, but hey, we're going to have a new dead horse and hopefully this is going to reflect all the different communities. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and shut up. And Anna, make sure you get some caffeine for this next session.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all and have a wonderful day. We'll send out a link for the recording if you need to reference anything later. Cheers.
Yes, thank you.